Okay.
Are we almost ready to go, or should I start interpretive dance? And I'll do a visual description. So she's standing and pointing, rapidly clapping, her arms flowing gently like a bird. Is it a bin chicken? Is it a seagull? No, she's gone astral warrior. And they're about to move the speaker.
That's not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about this.
Turn off the part.
Turn off the light.
You did. Oh.
Yeah, just testing.
Okay. Ready?
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to hand it over. Thank you. She didn't want to, though, did she? I think she wants the mic back. Okay, so people in the back, can you hear? Fabulous. Welcome. I need to go and meditate right now because I am so stressed out about the tech. But here we are. I really appreciate your patience once again. We are checking captions. They seem to be working. Captions are working. Excellent. So it's A11y. Woo! And it is our 14th A11y in Melbourne. And the legend himself, who created A11y in Melbourne, Adam, is Crook. So you're stuck with me and my mate here, Rusty, our tech guy.
Struggling tech guy. Struggling.
We did have Adam on the call earlier though, but he is very well, so yeah. I would also like to shout out Sarah Police, who actually started A11y in Sydney 14 years ago. She started 1 year after Global Accessibility Awareness Day began, which is pretty cool. So it's been going for a long time, and I really appreciate you all coming down here to celebrate. So you probably already all know where the toilets are because you've been here so bloody long. But in case you don't, we have someone, just the exits over here. No, the toilets are over there. If it's locked, you may need a key. Please see Benson Lowe, who is waving. And maybe you could point to the exits in case of emergency. Amazing. All right, we have 5 awesome speakers tonight who are going to give us a lightning talk each. And we're going to keep it to the 10 minutes each because we're tight on time now. So, but before we dive in, and I probably should have done this first, but I first want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we are meeting on here in Melbourne this evening, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present, and we extend that to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders here this evening. Also, a big thank you to Bupa for being our venue host this evening. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's venues and people like Bupa who help us out with these things. We couldn't have these events without you, so thank you. And also to Intopia for providing the pizza and the drinks, the refreshments. We've got captioning by AI Media. As you can see, we've finally got it working, which is fabulous. And we have a microphone care of Dan, as I said, golden shoes angel over there. So we're going to kick off with our first speaker. Our first speaker is Scott Hirschberger, and he will be presenting From Insights to Action, Transforming Accessibility Through Data-Driven Mapping.
Hello, everyone, and just gonna let everyone know really quick. I am from the States. I have a microphone in my hand. If I'm getting too loud, let me know. It tends to happen. Anyone that needs a visual description of me, I am a white male. I'm wearing a gray, I don't know, I think it's called a jumper. And I have brown shoes, and I've also been told I look exactly as I sound. So there we go. So I am the CEO and founder of Access Maps. I'm going to be giving Rusty cues if I can, and I'll try and do my best to get through this at a good clip because everyone knows you just want to hear nothing but data at the end of a long business day. So Rusty, let's get this rolling and we'll get into it. So I started Access Maps with my partner in 2022 or 2020, rebranded in 2022. And our mission is to take a strengths-based approach to make accessibility information easy to obtain, capture, and present for everyone to be able to use. And the way that we want to do this, I'll just click through the next page and get it nice and easy, is by providing a easy-to-use data capture tool that anyone can use. Literally received a comment from, I handed this to my grade 11 student to ask them to run around and grab everything the other day. And they might also be on our contractor list moving forward because they did an absolutely freaking phenomenal job. But we take all that information, we refine it, double check it, geostamped, all that fun stuff. And we create WCAG accessible displays for display on websites, apps. So think about a WCAG display for a store finder, a branch finder, or your local government council. And lastly, we provide our partners with the analytics to be able to better understand their accessibility information, how it's being used, where they can go next. So Rusty, all right. When we talk about accessibility, we're talking about the information that is used by first members of the community, and second, businesses that are inviting anyone on premise with them. And then thirdly, larger, should I say, organizations like city councils, local governments, transportation organizations, you name it. So I'm just going to start from the personal journey, expand into businesses, and then go into council. So when we are speaking about a community member with an access need, we're not just talking about someone that might identify as having a disability. We're speaking to the idea that as you age, you're more likely to have one or more forms of access need. Also speaking about support staff, family members, and parents with young children. So we know across Australia and New Zealand, 1 in 6 people has an access need. If you're over the age of 65, 50% of us will have 2 or 4 access needs at that point. I might need glasses, I might have a hearing aid. I could be using a wheelchair, I could be using a walking assistant, and so on and so forth. And lastly, I think I heard a quote a number of years ago from someone at CCS in New Zealand, who said, accessibility is the only minority demographic that is actively recruiting. So everyone in this room, if we are lucky enough, will have an access need at some point in our life. So age catches up with us all, and so does the unexpected, but I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So when someone with an access need is actually looking for information in the community, they're looking for something they can trust, something that can promote the idea of safety when they're going to be heading out into a new environment, and the idea of inclusion. So I'll just go, just because I know we're at a condensed pace, so I'll try and make this nice and quick. So end result is we know that individuals with access needs are actually at a higher risk when they're going into places where they're unfamiliar with the terrain. So that could be a universal term for the accessibility of business, or should I say the building, accessibility training for staff. So a lot of invisible labor goes into making decisions. So am I going to be jumping on Google Street Views before I go? Am I going to have to call up someone and then ask them, the 10 to 15 questions I have pre-scripted? And is the person I'm talking with going to actually understand what I'm saying? Because who knows, you could be getting our part-time staff member that's been in the role for 2 weeks and is super enthusiastic, but might not know what I'm talking about. So we try and make that easy for organizations to understand, and understand that the community has its own way of creating trust and relaying that on to everyone else. So for businesses, we know that you have a million different data points that are already being used. Most of them are to be able to find new opportunities in the market, be able to identify trends and mitigate risk. So whenever we create something with our partners, we want to make sure that the information that's being displayed through the websites, through our map linkages, through our maps network is also being recorded so businesses can actually take action on what they're doing. So here I've just shown a couple of kind of avenues in which we track metrics. One is through engagement. How often are your pieces of accessibility information being used? Is it being used by the community, being viewed? When we take a look at action, is it going to be giving an indication on the accessibility requirements of your potential visitors? Or are people actually looking at this information and then deciding not to go? And then how is the engagement being exited? So is that going to be an exit via sharing? Is it being exited by a copy link? Is it going to be going through a trip planner? So how is that going to be actually informing where you are and what's going to be happening? What's on screen now is actually a live example of one of our clients that created a map for an event that was held in Auckland about 2 weeks ago. They created their map, conducted their overview, and shared it out. And they were able to actually take all the information on the total number of times their accessibility information was viewed and what particular categories were engaged with before visitors arrived. So now you can actually plan, do we need to account for overflow parking? Do we have to go and make sure that we have the accessible restrooms are in just tip-top shape? Or do we have to open up a second accessible restroom in the same venue? Just different questions that you can ask and answer if you have this transparency. So some of the big things, and let me know if we are coming close on time. I will flip through to the last bit of it if we can. 3 minutes. All right. My details will be on the last slide. Add me on LinkedIn. I'll flip you all the slides at the end. So I'll ask Rusty, we'll jump forward 1 or 2 more slides to government, because that's what everyone wants to talk about these days. Just speaking as someone that, can't get enough of it, given my accent. This is actually the stuff that I'm actually proudest of, because I've talked with probably about 50 local and regional governments across Australia and New Zealand in the last 2.5 years. And every time I talk with the government, I ask them, where's your accessibility data? What's your baseline? How's it held? How's it tracked? Almost every single one says we don't have it. And it either goes into the too hard basket or, oh, we thought that was a national priority and it's just not there. So if we're capturing all this information on your parks, reserves, beaches, libraries, community centers, gyms, aquatic centers, so on, let's make that usable. So up next, I'm just gonna say thank you, Rusty, is an example of what we've done with the city of Tauranga in New Zealand. Do we have any Kiwis here tonight? Kia ora. If I'm going to be making a few jokes that might only land with a select couple of people here. So for anyone that's unaware, Tauranga is known as kind of the retirement capital of New Zealand. That's very relevant because, one, when we partnered with the council, they captured information on 32 locations and they came away with some action items. One, they realized just going to a place and looking at things through a very specific lens of accessibility, they were able to find different ways that they could make improvements right away. So indicating, hey, we can make a park more accessible because we need accessible parking spaces here. The park existed before legislation, so no parking spaces were added. And then of all the other places, how many need curb cuts? What needs to be repainted? Where are the accessible restrooms? And then just the staggering number of maintenance requests was kind of absurd. So what we've done with them since then is actually work with the different data sets that they have across, should I say, a range of demographics. I mentioned that this is the retirement village capital of New Zealand. So as we age, we know that mobility, accessibility is a larger requirement. So just taking a look at the population, roughly 26% of the population is over the age of 65, and they live in very select areas across the region. So what we did with the council was identify these hotspots and where the points of interest are, because we know that just because you're living in one place doesn't mean that you're always going to be there. So my background before doing all this is I used to run Health Metrics New Zealand. So Retirement Villages, Aged Care Association, should I say affiliates, and disability support organizations, running software for them. So when we talk about anything that's a risk when you go out, it impacts the individual that's going out as well as the support staff, carers, family members as well. We focus primarily on individuals over the age of 65 because New Zealand does not track data for individuals with accessibility requirements until about a year and a half. So just by being able to create these indicators, we could also create a heat map and give scores to how accessible the different regions are based on, is this going to be heavily involved for the government? Is this going to be, should I say, heavily influenced by local business? And then how can we start making changes? And just to point at the city center as an example, they went from being able to say, this is what's in the city center, these are the different organizations that are here, and this is the information that we have. They made a lot of actions that were around, should I say, focusing on the physical infrastructure that is universally applied. So their map is used roughly 60,000 times per month for, and should I say, a community that's about 142,000 people. But of all the changes that are made, a lot of them are to curb cuts, sidewalks, implementation of tactile indicators, and being able to actually take what we've been doing and make it publicly available to local businesses. So the local businesses have that same way of relaying that data and that information onto the community as well. The end result of all that is they were able to reduce their ACC claims. So that's accident insurance for anyone that goes into New Zealand. If you have a fall, if you go zorbing and something goes terribly wrong, or you want to really get into bungee jumping, you're covered. So they were able to actually reduce their ACC claims by 3.7% between 2022 and 2024. Of all those that were related to falls, slips, trips, for the senior community, there was 483 fewer incidences that were reported for critical circumstances. So someone that needed to, go to an ambulance, go into urgent care. And when you take into consideration, if you have a slip, a fall, anything that is severe when you are older, you're more likely to enter an end-of-life pathway, repeat hospitalizations, surgeries. It has a huge toll on your personal well-being and your quality of life. So that's a huge impact. And then just because we said government, if there's any politicians in the room, the savings was roughly $120 million a year because of that increased awareness and safety overall. So last thing I'll say is this is our LinkedIn. We are doing more and more work here in Australia, and love to talk to anyone. I'm also not going to take up too much time because I think the next person's on deck.
Thank you, Scott. That was amazing. I'm sorry I hurried you along at the end there, but grab Scott afterwards if you want to catch up, grab his LinkedIn. We're going to move on to our next speaker, which is Sam Sabor, Beyond Contrast, Rethinking Accessibility in Design Systems. And while we get our presentation, Sam Sabor. I actually had to turn to my friend Charlie and ask what zorbing was. Did anyone else have that question? Yeah, excellent. So I found out that it's when you get in a big ball and you roll down a hill, just in case you didn't know. Thanks for that, Scott. All right, I'm going to hand over to you, Sam. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here within your very colorful community tonight. So I'm going to speak to my experience as a UX UI turned product designer, turned design system designer, dealing with accessibility in large and complex products. First question first, I was just wondering if anyone in the room is coming from design background, has been struggling with the design challenges that we all been through with the accessibility. That's great. Thank you. I might ask a few questions later down the track. So I guess I need to cue you as well. Yeah, sure. This is going to be pretty much from design system perspective more than anything else, but I try to keep it maybe, I guess, understandable for people who have no interest in design as well. This is still accessibility, but very much in digital space rather than physical space. equally important. And I guess you know the drill. It's increasingly becoming more complex, especially with the AI and sort of, I guess, develop the level of authority we are leaving to large language learning models to do some of our heavy lifting. For us as designers, it's becoming increasingly more complex area to navigate. First thing first, I have this form here for you guys. And I am gonna go ahead and say this probably passes contrast, at least from the WCAG perspective. But do you think it's really accessible? Do you? Yeah, I'm seeing heads shaking disagreement. So anyone is interested to probably speak up and tell me what they think is wrong with this form and why it's not accessible. There is no wrong answer. I would love to hear just from you. Yes, please. Sorry, go.
I bet they're using placeholder.
Placeholders are, and no labels. Did you say that? Anything else? Wait, I know you know, the designers know.
All of the input fields exactly the same as the button.
Exactly, that's a huge problem. So for people who are online, all the input fields are actually looking exactly like the actual button as well, which surprisingly happens a lot more than you can ever imagine in forms. Yes, please, on to the next one. So when we work in, I guess, large teams, it's not as easy. You're not the only decision maker in the room, unfortunately. And you see this dead loop repeating itself a lot. You find an accessibility issue, you get someone to check the contrast, you go check the contrast, we tweak the colors, we do whatever we can, and then, we leave it with the dev team to check with their checkers. The checkers normally don't do, most of the standard checkers, the Chrome extensions, etc. They don't do proper a UX accessibility check. They just go through sort of, a checklist of criteria. Comes back fine, passes the score that needs to pass, we ship, and the user keeps struggling with the form. If I can, please, thank you so much. Why contrast, in my experience, and I'm sure in many of designers' experience, becomes such a hero, such a quintessential sort of piece that everyone puts so much focus on at the cost of everything else that is accessibility. I think it's easy to measure, obviously. It's easy to automate, it's easy to report, everyone knows very well about it. It feels very much objective as well and creates a false sense of certainty, unfortunately, in my experience. Thank you. Both VCAG and WCAG and APCA, they do a very good job when it comes to contrast. The Web Accessibility Guideline actually takes it a lot further and covers a lot of other grounds beyond the contrast itself. Both of them, though, they are industry standards, they're structures, but they really are not, the entire user experience. And the problem starts when us as team try to sort of, I guess, narrowly interpret it, maybe because of the limited resources, times, or effort it takes to put out the accessibility battle every single day, I guess. Please, thank you. Whereas, as you can see, contrast is part of the accessibility, of course, but you have your labels, as you mentioned, you have the hint text, you have, I guess, spacing, obvious ones are always there. You have your states, you have your tab target, but you have the more complex ones as well. You have your semantics, you have your hierarchy, your motions, and like even more, I guess, elaborate ones, cognitive load and error preventions that are substantially are the outcome of a very poor or very good accessibility practice. Now back to that form. So the first form, and then the improvement on the form on the other on the right side. So I am neurodivergent myself as well. I struggle with my left and right all the time. You can see there are. This is not the perfect shape. I'm sure if you look at the proposed version, you still see things missing, and there's still room for improvement. But simply what happens sadly is that we barely get to even do the first form entirely, sort of, I guess, and accurately, let alone the second form. In many sort of larger contexts, it's sometimes considered a waste of time or space, to have the labeling as well as like the placeholder, or to have the date picker, or to indicate which fields are necessary, or to put enough focus on the core CTA. Thank you. And this is why I keep, I guess, telling different teams that accessibility is not a subatomic color concern. It's something that we need to sort of push for at the component level. We need to consider sort of accessibility at the design system level to be, I guess, seriously talking about accessibility. We need to talk about the tokens and components and patterns and flows. And none of these, by the way, they fail on their own. They always fail in the context when you ship them. So testing becomes substantially important. Thank you. I guess the next natural question would be then what we should be looking at when we are talking about accessibility and having an accessible product. We tend to, I guess, then again get caught up in what's easier to measure, whereas we have, I guess, the responsibility as design advocates and user experience advocates to look for, more complex metrics to make sure that what we ship is actually usable for, for people from all walk of life. And those things are things such as task completions, error frequencies, misclicks, cognitive frictions that you can probably, drive from, all the above. Screen reader flows are very important, but probably very common and but people should be very well aware of it, I'm assuming. Form abandonment, state clarity, and navigation confidence, they all, come into play when we're talking about accessibility. I guess at the end of the day, we all know that the human in front of the computer is the I guess is the consumer of what we put out. And it's extremely important to understand that any accessibility struggle comes at an emotional weight for the person who is using the product. It makes them feel fatigued, tired, incompetent, excluded. And I think sometimes it's hard to, find the motivation to keep going when you might be the only person in the team who is pushing for accessibility. And it's always good to, I guess, inspire your team, but also yourself, that there's always a human. And there is always, accessibility is actually a very emotional matter as well. And it's extremely important from that perspective. To me, at least, I think the future, the next maturity stage for design teams could potentially look like this: accessibility being embedded into the design system by design system designers. I personally would love to talk to anyone who is interested to sort of, I guess, take that path of, of going down the route of design system design from accessibility perspective, because that's where everything starts essentially, and then gets sort of populated. If you make a mistake, that's where it starts and becomes like a million instances in your product. And if you do a good job, then that's where it starts as well. Component-driven evaluation rather than focusing on sub-atoms such as colors, I guess just headings, etc. Cross-functional ownership, it's always a designer and engineer job, never just a designer job. And also I would say product owner's job as well. Accessibility to be considered as a UX actually quality and not a nice to have. and accessibility beyond compliance. So we are committed to an accessible product, not just to tick those boxes, but to for the sake of that human that we talked about. I guess that's a bit of a just a repeat. It's not accessibility. It's not a color problem. And when we narrow it down to a color problem, we are risking the product success and the human connection, and I guess everything in between. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Sam. That's dear to my heart. I come from a design background, and I think that idea of not even though it's the easiest thing to measure, it doesn't necessarily have the most measurable impact. Yeah, thank you. Next up, we have Aisha Sanford, and Aisha will be presenting where to start and stop with screen reader testing.
Yeah.
Welcome, Aisha.
There's lots of animations and stuff. That's it. Oh, actually, you can just do it this way. If that's easier. Yeah, okay, cool.
Hi everyone. Just to begin, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of traditional owners. So our event today is being held on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I wish to acknowledge them as traditional owners. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present. So my talk today is where to start and stop with screen reader testing. I'm Aisha. I'm a digital accessibility consultant at Intopia, and I've done a lot of accessibility testing. So just really quickly, what is a screen reader? For those of you who don't know, a screen reader is software that converts text to speech. It's an assistive technology, and it allows people who are blind or low vision to access the web or mobile apps. It basically just reads out everything on a screen. Next one, sorry. So let's just set the scene. You've been asked to do accessibility testing and you've been asked to use a screen reader. It's not as straightforward as it seems. So there's a couple reasons why. The first reason is there is a bit of a learning curve, okay? They seem easy to use, screen readers, but once you start to dive a bit deeper into them, you'll notice that there's many different ways to navigate, there's different ways to interact with content, and like there's so many different hotkeys, I can't remember any of them. The other reason why screen readers are, difficult to start with is that they're really good at finding accessibility issues, but like a little too good. So let's imagine you're testing a page with a screen reader and it's your first pass of this page and you're going through with a screen reader. As you're going through the content, you notice that the heading levels are wrong. Because screen readers you can only use with a keyboard, you also happen to notice that some interactive elements don't have a focus indicator. You notice link text isn't unique. There's some graphs that are also on the page, and you notice that they don't have any text alternatives to explain what's in them.
Is that better?
Oh yeah, I'll just
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's click the next button.
You also notice that there's some show hide buttons on the page and they don't convey their expanded or the collapsed state. And of course, there's got to be a lovely carousel on there. And you notice that you actually can't change the slides with your screen reader. And I'm sure there's more. What I want to, sorry, go back. What I want to convey here is that on your first pass of this page, you have found 6 WCAG issues. Those are all WCAG issues, and some of them are really complex. And the problem with finding this many issues on a first pass is that it can be really overwhelming and it can be really easy to lose track of where you are and what issues you're raising. So where do you start? And here I've got an image of Homer Simpson at his nuclear power plant control desk, and he's looking very, very stressed. This is actually what I looked like when I first started accessibility testing. So my advice is to test everything you can without a screen reader first. So what can you test without a screen reader? There's heaps you can test without a screen reader first. You can test keyboard navigation. So check focus order, focus indicators, You can test browser zoom, heading structure, descriptive link text, page title, error handling, so making sure errors are being communicated to users correctly, image alt text, you don't need a screen reader for that, color contrast, of course, for text and non-text content, text spacing, touch target size, so making sure your controls are large enough, form fields, so making sure that they all have labels and instructions and they don't use placeholder text. So all this stuff you can test with a mixture of manual tests, automated testing tools, and also bookmarklets. Screen readers are just one part of accessibility testing. They're really important. They're a super important tool, but they are just one part of digital accessibility. So I guess the next question is, what should you test with a screen reader? So the first one I would recommend testing, or doesn't matter what order in, but yeah, it's status messages or live regions. This relates to 413 status messages in WCAG. For those who don't know, status messages are kind of like little announcements that are just for screen readers. They're often used to notify a user of a change that has occurred somewhere else on the page while they're in the middle of a task on another part of the page. So this means that a good example is, add to cart when you're on a shopping website. So you hit the add to cart button and maybe there's a little notification that pops up or the cart icon updates at the top of the page. You have to let users know that that's occurring without moving them away from what they're doing. So the thing with status messages is they can be visible, but they can also be invisible in that they're not actually text on the page. So they can be hard to find in code, but also it's hard to know when they're occurring without a screen reader. You've probably been on a website today and there's probably been live announcements happening and you wouldn't have a clue unless you turned on a screen reader. So this one definitely tests with a screen reader. The next one is checking contents announced in the right order. This relates to 132 meaningful sequence in WCAG. So sometimes the visual layout doesn't match what's announced to screen readers, and obviously this can make content completely lose meaning. I find this issue is a lot easier to identify with a screen reader. You could have a website that's perfectly in order and everything looks great, and you run through it with a screen reader and it doesn't make sense and it's announced out of order. So this is a good one to test as well. Focus management. So this one relates to 243 focus order in WCAG. I know I said you can check this with a keyboard, but you really should check it with a screen reader as well, because keyboard focus and screen reader focus can behave really differently. And I find screen reader focus is a lot less forgiving. And it's also, the issues with screen reader focus are a lot more obvious than keyboard focus as well. So definitely check with a screen reader. Error handling. So error handling is really important to make sure that this information is communicated clearly and concisely to screen readers as well. So things like making sure focus is managed correctly, and making sure that users know where the errors are, what fields they relate to, and how to fix them. These are some optional criteria that I like to check. You don't need to do it, but I just find it's good to do. So checking all interactive elements have an interactive role, a name, and a state if relevant. So a state like checked or unchecked. This relates to 412 name role value. So you can get all this information by navigating to an interactive element. I like to do it because I like to check that they make sense in context as well. And it's just easy to get all the information at once. Another one that I really prefer to test with screen readers is visible name of the control matches the label announced by the screen reader. This relates to 253 label and name in WCAG. So this one can be a lot easier to identify than looking through the code. If you're already looking through a form, it's really easy to see, like, the label that's on the screen and then versus what you hear. If they don't match, that's an issue. Another one is images. This relates to 1.1.1 non-text content in WCAG. You don't need a screen reader to test this, but I like to do it. I like to check if the alternative text makes sense when read aloud along with the image and make sure that it contextually makes sense as well. That's really important. This one's not optional, you have to test this. Complex widgets. So what I mean by that are like really custom components with complex interactions. So things like date pickers, address search, auto suggests, complex data tables that allow for sorting, filtering, and pagination, menus, especially mega menus, and things with complex interactions like drag and drop interactions. It's really important, like with these things, they can look okay on the surface, but then once you start looking at them with a screen reader, a lot can go wrong. So it's really important to test complex widgets with a screen reader. And speaking about things going wrong and checking things work, just make sure your page is functional with a screen reader in general. It's really important that your page works. And if it works with a screen reader and it works with a keyboard, that's a really, really good indication it's going to work with other assistive technologies. So things like switch devices, voice activation software like Dragon Naturally Speaking or Apple Voice Control, other text-to-speech software. So to summarize, it's not a great summary screen, sorry. Test with screen readers. Just keep testing with screen readers. It's super important for digital accessibility, but just try and be more targeted in your testing so that you don't miss issues and you don't become overwhelmed. So I recommend test everything you can without a screen reader first, and then pick up the screen reader and go through the rest. Thank you.
Aisha, did you all catch that? You got everything? That's a power order out there. Thanks, Aisha. We're going to move on to our second last speaker, Jamila Savoy. And Jamila will be sharing with us tonight. You can't be accessible if people can't understand you. Welcome.
Thank you. I have a bit of a story about it. So, and then you'll know when to go to them.
Okay.
And you listen to me.
Hello, everyone. Gosh, that's my voice, very loud. It's very nice to be here today. I am Jamila. I'm a communications professional foremostly. So a lot of the WCAG technical stuff is way out of my remit, but I love learning about it. And I'm here today to talk about you can't be accessible if people can't understand you. So I want you to sit back and think to yourself, you are on the internet, whatever device you like. You are trying to find some information about renewing your license. You've found a fantastic website. The colour contrast is great. The navigation is perfect. The headings are amazing. You find your heading, and this is what you find. Renew your license. License renewals are available for either 10 years or 3 years for people under 75, and for 3 years for those 75 and over. A 3-year license renewal allows you more frequent opportunity to consider your driving needs and whether you need to notify the medical review team of a medical condition or disability. Notification aims to support your ongoing driving safety. This is from a real website. It is still live, and I was going to name and shame them tonight, but I decided not to. So, what I am here to talk about is what I'm kind of calling a hidden accessibility problem, a hidden accessibility barrier. And this is, you might have a fantastic website and new designers have done an amazing job. It's being tested, it's fantastic. But actually, people can't understand what's on it, how to use it, and therefore to progress with whatever there is that they're trying to do. And so I've got some examples here, a few more before and afters. Applicants are required to provide supporting documentation to substantiate their eligibility. Please upload documents that show you are eligible. Another example. If there are any points on which you require further explanation or clarification, we are available by phone. If you have any questions, please call us. These before and afters here are before and afters based on using plain language principles to edit this information. What I like to talk about when I talk about plain language is about who we might be excluding by having information that's hard to understand. That's not clear, direct, and easy to understand. And I think this room probably is across a lot of them. I've got an iceberg, fantastic iceberg metaphor on the screen here. And up the top, in the bit that we can see, we've got some of the things that we might be able to visibly see. Someone's, or hear the language someone speaks, their age, their disability, if it's a physical disability, maybe their cultural background. But there are actually a lot of things under the surface that we may not know about, that our complex jargon-filled information is actually making it really hard for someone to get their job done. This might be things like the trust that they have in your organisation to start with, just landing on your website, their confidence or capability in digital literacy or English literacy, their fears, any hidden disability. We've talked about this a little bit tonight, the stress, the cognitive overload that we all experience, any personal and social challenges that they might be experiencing. Now, I had to put something about WCAG in the presentation because I acknowledge my audience here. It is covered. It is. Often in AAA, which for a lot of organisations they're not striving for, certainly government isn't striving for. So I pulled out 3.1.3 unusual words, providing explanations for unusual words or jargon, 3.1.4 abbreviations, helping users understand abbreviations, and 3.1.5 reading level, so writing at a lower secondary education level where possible. So it does acknowledge it, I just don't think we talk about it enough. So what is plain language? This is something that you may be aware of, or maybe you're not, but it is a very specific way of writing. It has its own set of rules and principles, which I'm going to introduce you to in just a moment, but I'm not going to teach you how to do it. And it is a way of approaching your work where you're thinking about your reader and you're making sure that they can understand what they read the first time round without having to reread your information. So we're looking for clear, direct, easy to understand information. This is a definition from the International Plain Language Standard, which is another standard that I think we should overlay over WCAG. And so it doesn't matter if you're striving for AAA, actually it becomes just commonplace. And I've put on here the definition from the standard, which I like because it talks about plain language ensures readers can find what they need, understand it, and use it. And I think you can all see there are some kind of correlation between WCAG and the plain language standard. So you're considering what your readers want to know and need to know, their level of interest, expertise, and literacy skills, and the context in which your readers will use the document. So you're thinking here, if you're creating a website that is about emergency services, emergency management, that the people coming to your website may be in a crisis when they come to your website, and all of the amazing function that they may have going through life is completely out the door because a fire is coming towards their house. So we're thinking about how someone might be engaging with my information. Very, very quickly, the standard has 4 parts. It starts with focusing on your audience. It talks about how to organise your content. It talks about writing clearly, and it talks about testing and improving. And I don't think I have many more slides yet, but I'm going to put a little interjection here. This applies to everything you do in a work capacity. So I know we are here talking about digital accessibility and how it might impact the work that you do in that space. But this standard and making sure that your information is easy to understand is relevant to any email you write to any colleague, any email you write to any manager, any report that you write for any client, anything. And I encourage you to think about learning a little bit more and applying it to your work. I like to include this slide in the presentations I do. It's a quote by a lady named Deborah Bosley, who was very influential in the United States. And I noticed we had our previous speaker who was from the States. The US actually have legislation that says that the government must write in plain language. And Deborah was really influential in getting that passed back in 2010. So this is not new legislation. This is legislation that's been around for a while. And her quote is, "People have a right to understand information that affects their life." I think that this is what we are all here trying to do. And I would just like everyone to maybe think about the words on the screen as much as all the other things that we often do with digital accessibility. I encourage you to learn more. I've got some resources here. Australian Government Style Manual is fantastic. Hemingway Editor for your readability score if you are striving for AAA. that can help you test whether you're there. The language, the plain language standard itself, there's also a legal and a science version if you happen to be working in the legal space or the science space. And there are some international organisations that are really good, have some more information. I can also help if you would like, and that's me done. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamila. I think if contrast was the under or oversung hero, I'd say plain language is the undersung hero. Thank you. We have our last speaker for the evening, which is Xavier Vella, who will be sharing early findings from an accessibility audit of hiring systems. Hello, Xavier.
Still got my notes. I'm going to refer to them.
Fab.
That's all right.
Yeah, yeah. Do you need me to do anything for you?
We'll see how we manage on one.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Sorry.
It's all right.
It's that one. The different tab.
If you go, was it close?
Yes. Thank you, man. Legend.
Cool. So my name's Xavier. I'm an engineer focused on accessibility and assistive tech. I also have a limb difference, so accessibility is something I deal with in my day-to-day life, as well as something I want to work more with. I'm currently navigating the job market, and I found myself asking the question, how accessible are modern hiring systems? Because accessibility doesn't start after you get the job, it starts the moment you try to apply. So I turned this into a small accessibility research project.
Sorry, man.
No, it's fine. So accessibility in hiring systems begins before you even click apply. Barriers can occur at the job advert stage, application portals, assessments and interviews, and these barriers all matter. In Australia, employment rates for people with disability are around 30% lower than people without. That raises an important question. Are there systemic barriers in hiring systems that exclude people who use assistive tech or have disabilities? I wanted to test this in a practical way. I conducted an accessibility audit on real hiring systems and engineering for engineering and software roles. This research had 2 stages. So this first stage looked at everything before clicking apply. So at first I analyzed the job adverts. So I reviewed the structure and readability. I also checked if there was an accommodation statement. Secondly, I then tested the job platforms that were hosting these adverts. These platforms I tested were Indeed, LinkedIn, and Seek. These platforms are crucial because they dominate how people search for jobs online. Testing used automated tools such as AppsDevTools, Wave, Google Lighthouse, along with manual keyboard navigation. Accessibility issues were grouped into 6 failure categories, so we could clearly see where problems occurred. Stage 2 involved analysis on the applicant tracking platform. This involved testing the applicant tracking systems used to submit applications following the full application process and testing accessibility at each step. So accessibility issues appeared quickly. Only 27% of job adverts actually included an accommodation statement, and of those, a quarter provided a direct contact for candidates to request adjustments. Looking at the job platforms, 82% of them produced accessibility errors. Indeed performed the best, averaging 0, accessibility issues using dev tools. LinkedIn averaged 10.75 issues and Seek 13.5 issues. The most common category was accessible names and labels, accounting for 59% of all detected issues. This type of error particularly impacts screen readers, users, making it difficult to understand what controls do. So before a candidate even clicks apply, they're facing significant barriers. In stage 2 of the research, every applicant tracking system I tested produced accessibility errors. To show this in a practical way, I've got a little case study. So this case study was on the best performing company across the test. It was the only job advert that scored full marks for their accessibility accommodation. So accessibility is clearly on the company's agenda. However, submitting the application involved multiple stages and every stage had accessibility issues. The most common issue was for content not contained within landmarks. That's all right, we'll leave that there. The platform was technically keyboard navigable, but it was often slow and frustrating to navigate. One positive was when the session timed out, data was preserved. But the important thing to highlight here is that these accessibility barriers are caused by the applicant tracking system and not the company itself. However, if a company is committed to accessibility, the hiring tools they choose must also be accessible. Otherwise, accessibility breaks down before the candidate even enters the organisation. The real impact of these barriers on candidates is that they take much longer to apply. They can even abandon the application process entirely, or they feel excluded from opportunities. Accessibility barriers in hiring systems don't just create inconvenience, they silently filter people out of the workforce. Sorry. So this research is still early stage, and there's a lot of limitations with a small sample size and me being the only researcher. But next steps include analysing more job adverts, testing additional applicant tracking systems, and documenting the full hiring journey, so assessments and interviews, which I haven't been able to do yet. Basically, just because I haven't had an interview or done any of the assessments. So I would like to also include other people in this research. So diverse perspectives and lived experiences would strengthen this data and insights greatly. My goal is to continue sharing my findings and develop evidence-based accessibility guidelines for hiring systems. Because again, accessibility shouldn't start after someone's hired. It should start the moment someone tries to apply. Sorry, one more slide. So thank you all so much for your time. I've really enjoyed conducting this research and I appreciate you listening to me. If you want to connect, and I'm happy to talk more keep these conversations going and talk more about this research. One final thing I'll leave you with. Accessibility cannot be achieved without co-design. User testing alone isn't enough. People with disability need to be involved in the style projects, treated as subject matter experts, and given real decision-making power. Because when accessibility is built in from the start, everyone benefits. Thank you.
So that was amazing. Thank you for sharing. I might know someone who might be interested in connecting research-wise, so let's talk. Yeah, it was really interesting. Thank you. Now, I know we kind of sped through everyone really quickly because we started so late, but I thought maybe if the speakers were okay with it, we could throw some questions out. If anyone wants to ask questions of any of the speakers, feel free. I can't bring the mic because we've got cord, but does anyone have any questions? No? Aisha, yeah, the power auditor. Yeah.
Because the subject, the title was like their view stop the testing. I was wondering as far as sort of, I guess, using screen readers for making mobile apps as well. So you could do a separated flow for iOS and another for Android. Yeah.
So the question for everyone was, does Aisha use screen readers for native apps? Is that the get? Yeah. Do you want to answer, Aisha?
Yes, definitely. Android has talkback and iOS has voiceover. So I'll still do all my tests before I do the screen reader, and then I'll do them both last. Yeah.
Thank you, Sam. Anyone else before we close up? Yes, Scott. Aisha.
What is your?
Descriptions for loading screens is what I heard.
So what's the
Good, passage. Recommendation, is when you're using a screen reader for a loading screen or loading. Yeah, so what's your recommendation on that? Because we see feedback from the community on it.
for like a full page loading spinner, I would just do a status message, like a live region announcement. And ideally the text would be enough information so you could just do the same text in the live region, the same as the on-screen text. When you're doing like local loading spinners, that's a bit trickier. I think if the user has activated a button and there's a loading state, you absolutely need to let them know. And again, I would do a live region again as well. Yeah. If there's like content that's updating separately to like the rest of the page and there's another little loading spinner and it hasn't loaded yet, I have seen like just not announcing that to users until they get to it. So then they can just get to that loading spinner, they can hear that it's loading, and then maybe you can have another live region announcement to say that it's done. Yeah, there's lots of different ways.
Amazing answer. I don't know what half of what you just said, but it's okay. No, very technical. I hope you got that, Scott. Yeah, what would you like to ask?
AI bots accessible, because to prompt them, we have to make it detailed, right? So how do we make it plain language and accessible for everyone?
How do we make AI bots accessible? Just an easy one to finish up on. Bobby in the lobby. Any chance you want to take that one?
I'm just a punter. Oh! Deadly. My colleague of theirs, former speaker. I am finishing an audit for a chatbot that you all might need to use for a mandatory government survey. I'm not going to say any of the special words, but for local chatbots, so not general LLMs like Claude, you can use local caching. You've got to understand like how it loads. If the information loads like a little bit by little bit, the same way that GPT or Gemini or Claude loads, then that information might be sent at every instance to the screen reader. So if you have set commands for set chatbots, it's a lot easier to make it accessible. But from what we've heard, at least what I read during GAD today, is like having access to AI tools is really making life easier in general. So as we all know, people with disabilities will persevere, they will adapt, they will find workarounds to make things work. And if things are good enough, like if the value proposition is good enough, they're gonna just persevere.
So making it accessible is just like making any other product accessible, like the curb cuts to statuses. I'm just a punter with a dead leg.
And you nailed it. Thanks, Bobby and Lovey. We might wrap it up there since we haven't got much more time, but please feel free to, chat more for a little bit longer. We can stay. But I want to say thank you to all the speakers who presented today. It was such a diverse range of topics, and I really, really appreciate your time, your energy. Thank you. I also want to say a big thank you to Rusty for stepping in to be my tech guy.
If anybody would like to come and tell me how to make things full screen, please come and talk to me now.
I might just admit that neither of us know how to use a PC. So embarrassing. But we work in digital, don't worry. Thank you to the Golden Shoe Angel over there who saved the evening with the last minute mic. And again to our sponsors, our returning sponsors. We've been here before. Thanks for having us at your home. And that's it. Happy Gad. I hope you took home some alley bites. Excuse the pun. Sorry, not sorry. And enjoy yourselves for the rest of the evening. Thank you. You're welcome.